The scent reached me first, pine needles crushed underfoot, winter frost, and something raw and primal that made my spine straighten despite myself. The great hall fell silent as he entered, though I couldn't see him. I didn't need to. The collective intake of breath from 200 people told me everything. The Alpha King had arrived. "Keep your head down," Mira whispered beside me, her fingers digging painfully into my arm. "Don't draw attention." I almost laughed. Drawing attention was the last thing I'd ever been able to do until today. Today, I was to be the court's greatest joke. The wooden floor beneath my knees had grown hard and uncomfortable during the hour we'd been waiting. All the Omegas from our pack were presented today as potential servants in the royal household, a peace offering after the recent border disputes. But unlike the others, I hadn't been chosen for my skills or beauty. I'd been chosen because I was useless. The blind Omega, the burden, the one our pack leader was glad to be rid of. "Next," a bored voice called from somewhere ahead. Another nervous Omega rose from our line and walked forward. I fingered the small carved wolf that hung around my neck, the last gift my grandmother had given me before she died. "Your eyes may not see," she'd told me, "but your heart will recognize truth when others are blind to it." The irony never escaped me that the blind girl was supposed to see truth better than others. But my grandmother's wisdom had been the only thing keeping me alive these past years. After my parents died and left me at the mercy of a pack that saw me as nothing but a drain on resources. "He's looking at the presentation gifts," Mira whispered, providing commentary as she always did, my only real friend among the Omegas. Oh gods, Sadie just dropped the ceremonial goblet. The Alpha looks furious. I clutched my own gift tighter. A small leather pouch containing herbs I'd grown myself. Even without sight, I'd learned to cultivate plants by smell and touch. My herbs were the only valuable thing I could offer, though I knew they'd be laughed at compared to the gold and jewels the others had brought. The presentations continued for another hour, each Omega approaching, offering their gift, and being assigned a position in the royal household. Some were sent to the kitchens, others to the gardens, the fortunate few to personal service in the royal chambers. Each assignment was met with either relieved sighs or disappointed murmurs. Then it was Mira's turn. Her hand squeezed mine once before she left my side. I sat completely alone now, the last in line. Exactly as planned. "And what skills do you bring to the Alpha King's household?" the bored voice asked Mira. "I am trained in music, my lord. Piano and harp. And I read well, for those who require assistance with correspondence." A grunt of approval. "To the music room, then. Report to Mistress Ilara in the morning." Mira's footsteps moved away, and I felt the weight of the room's attention shift to me, the final offering, the punchline to a cruel joke. "Next." My legs trembled as I stood. Someone had left a walking stick propped against the wall for me, not out of kindness, but to make my blindness more obvious. I grasped it, using it to find my way forward, counting steps as I'd been taught. Whispers followed me like shadows. Is she really blind? What use could she possibly be? Lord Vance must truly despise the Alpha to send such an insult. 20 steps. I stopped, sensing the open space before me where the Alpha King and his advisors sat in judgment. The scent was overwhelming here, that same pine and frost, but also leather, metal, and power. So much power it made me dizzy. "State your name and purpose," the bored voice commanded. I lifted my chin, facing straight ahead though I couldn't see who I was addressing. "Ilara of the Eastern Forest Pack, my lord. I come to serve however I might be useful." A different voice spoke then, deeper, like distant thunder. The Alpha King himself. "And how exactly might you be useful, little Omega?" The question dripped with mockery, exactly what Lord Vance had anticipated. I was to be humiliated before being dismissed. Proof that our pack leader could insult the mighty Alpha King and suffer no consequences because we were too small to be worth punishing. Instead of shrinking as expected, I held out my small leather pouch. "I bring healing herbs of my own cultivation, Alpha King. I may not see, but my hands know the difference between feverfew and nightshade, between the leaf that heals and the one that kills." A long silence followed. I could feel eyes studying me, assessing, judging. "A blind herbalist?" someone snickered. "What next? A deaf musician?" I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse every day of my life. Heavy footsteps approached, boots on wood, deliberate and measured. The scent grew stronger, enveloping me. The Alpha King had risen from his throne to approach me personally. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. "Look at me," he commanded. "I cannot, my lord," I replied softly. "But I am looking toward you." A hand suddenly gripped my chin, tilting my face upward. I gasped at the contact, not from fear, but from the sudden rush of warmth that spread from his fingers through my entire body. My grandmother's pendant seemed to grow hot against my chest. Her eyes, someone murmured, "They're silver." "Moon-touched," another voice whispered. "The old magic." The Alpha King's thumb brushed over my cheek, an unexpectedly gentle gesture from someone who commanded such fear. "Can you see anything at all, little Omega? Light? Shadows?" I shook my head slightly, constrained by his grip still on my chin. "Nothing since birth, my lord. But I hear what others miss, and I feel what others ignore. And what do you feel now?" His voice had dropped lower, meant for my ears alone. "Truth," my grandmother's voice whispered in my memory. "I feel that you are not what you pretend to be," I answered before I could stop myself. His hand tensed on my face. For a terrible moment, I thought he might strike me for my insolence. Instead, he released me and addressed the room. "This one comes to my private chambers." The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. No one had expected this, least of all me. Private chambers meant personal service to the Alpha King himself, the highest honor for an Omega. It was absurd for someone like me. "My lord," protested the bored voice, which I now realized belonged to his steward. "Surely the blind one would be better placed in the kitchens, or perhaps the laundry. Did I misspeak, Thorn?" The Alpha King's voice carried a growl beneath the words, a reminder of the beast that lived within the man. "No, Alpha King, as you command." The steward's voice had lost all its boredom, replaced with something like fear. Large hands closed around my upper arms, and I was guided, or rather, pulled away from the presentation area. The Alpha King himself was leading me through his court, and I could feel hundreds of eyes watching in disbelief. This wasn't how the joke was supposed to end. I was meant to be dismissed, sent to the lowest position if accepted at all, not elevated above all the other Omegas. We passed through doorways and down corridors, the sounds changing as we moved deeper into the castle. The public noise of the great hall faded, replaced by the quieter rustle of servants and guards who stepped hastily aside as we approached. No one spoke to us. No one dared. Finally, a door opened and closed behind us, and the sounds became muffled and close. A smaller space, private and insulated from the castle's bustle. "Sit," he commanded, guiding me to what felt like a cushioned chair. I perched on its edge, still clutching my walking stick and herb pouch, wondering if this was merely a prelude to some greater humiliation. Perhaps the Alpha King wanted privacy to mock me properly, to explain exactly how worthless a blind Omega was before sending me to the dungeons. I heard him moving around the room, opening what sounded like a cabinet, pouring liquid into glasses. The domestic sounds were strangely at odds with the fearsome reputation that preceded him. "Drink this." A glass pressed into my hand. I sniffed it cautiously. Wine, rich and fragrant. "It's not poisoned," he said, amusement in his voice. "If I wanted you dead, little Omega, there are far more efficient methods. Despite everything, I found myself smiling slightly. That's not very reassuring, my lord." He laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and pleasure that transformed the energy between us. "You're either very brave or very foolish to speak to me this way." I sipped the wine, letting its warmth spread through me. Probably both. Being blind means I never learned when to look away submissively. "Good." The Alpha King moved closer, his scent wrapping around me like a physical touch. "I have enough people who won't meet my eyes, though in your case I suppose it's understandable." "Why did you bring me here?" I asked, setting down the wineglass carefully on what I hoped was a table beside me. "We both know this was meant as an insult from Lord Vance, sending a blind Omega to serve an Alpha King. It's a joke at both our expenses." "Is that what you think? That you're a joke?" His voice had hardened again. I lifted my chin. "I know what I am, and what I'm not. I'm not beautiful like the other Omegas. I'm not accomplished in the ways that matter to most. But I'm not worthless, despite what Lord Vance believes. No, the Alpha King agreed, his voice suddenly closer. He must have knelt before me because his next words came from directly in front of my face. You're not worthless, Ilara of the Eastern Forest. You're something far more dangerous. My breath caught. What do you mean? His fingers found my pendant, the carved wolf my grandmother had given me. This symbol. Do you know what it means? I shook my head. My grandmother gave it to me. She said it would help me see truth. It's the mark of the moon priestesses, he said quietly. A sisterhood thought to be extinct for over a century. Women who could speak to the goddess directly, who could see past deception, who could, according to legend, tame even the wildest of alphas. My fingers closed around the pendant protectively. That's impossible. My grandmother was just a healer in our pack like I am. Was she blind as well? The question startled me. No, at least not until the very end of her life. She said her eyes had seen enough for one lifetime. The Alpha King made a sound of satisfaction, as if I'd confirmed something he already suspected. And these herbs you grow? You said you can distinguish them by touch and smell alone? I nodded. Show me. I opened my pouch, pulling out several bundles of dried herbs. This is lavender, for calming and sleep. I placed it on what I now confirmed was a table beside me. This is rosemary, for memory and clarity. Another bundle followed. Thyme for courage, mint for stomach ailments, willow bark for pain. My fingers found the last bundle, smaller than the others, wrapped carefully in waxed paper. And this is rarer, moonflower. It only blooms at night during the full moon and must be harvested in darkness. My grandmother taught me how to find it by its scent. The Alpha King's hand closed over mine, his skin warm against my fingers. And what is moonflower used for, little Omega? I hesitated. My grandmother had warned me never to speak of this herb's true purpose. For women's ailments, I said instead. Liar, he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only fascination. The moonflower is sacred to the goddess. It reveals what is hidden. It breaks enchantments. It shows truth. My heart pounded. How would you know such things? His thumb stroked over my knuckles, sending shivers up my arm. Because I've been searching for someone like you for a very long time, Ilara. Someone who could see through the curse that binds me. Curse? I whispered. What curse? But the Alpha King rose suddenly to his feet. That's enough for today. You must be tired after your journey. His tone had changed, becoming more formal, distant. My personal servant will show you to your quarters. You'll begin your duties tomorrow. What duties? I asked, confused by his abrupt shift. I don't understand any of this. You will. He moved away, and I heard him pull a bell cord. Within seconds, the door opened. Kira, show our new guest to the Blue Chamber. See that she has everything she needs. The Blue Chamber? A female voice questioned in surprise. But sire, that's in the royal family wing. Did I stutter? There was that growl again, the beast beneath the man. No, my king. At once. A gentle hand touched my arm. This new servant, Kira. Come with me, miss. As I rose to follow her, the Alpha King spoke once more. Ilara. I turned toward his voice. Lord Vance may have sent you as a joke, but I promise you this, you will never return to him. You belong to me now. The declaration should have terrified me. Instead, my grandmother's pendant warmed against my skin, and something like recognition fluttered in my chest. Yes, my king, I answered, and for the first time in my life, submission felt like power. The Blue Chamber, as it turned out, was a suite of rooms larger than my family's entire cottage had been. Kira guided me through the space, placing my hand on furniture and doorways to help me create a mental map. Bed to the left, wardrobe against the far wall, sitting area by the windows, bathing chamber through this door. She explained patiently. Her voice was kind but cautious, as if she couldn't quite believe I was meant to be here either. The floors are clear of obstacles. King Alaric insisted on that specifically when he ordered the room prepared. I froze at the mention of his name. King Alaric? The Alpha King? Yes, Kira replied, surprise in her voice. Did you not know his name? I shook my head. In our pack, he was only ever referred to as the Alpha King, as if he were more myth than man. Knowing his name made him suddenly, disconcertingly real. Well, you'd best get used to it, Kira continued, leading me to what felt like a plush chair. You'll be seeing a lot of him, apparently. The way she said it carried implications I couldn't quite decipher. What exactly am I meant to do here? I asked, sinking into the chair. He mentioned duties, but never explained what they were. Kira's hesitation was palpable. I honestly don't know. This is unusual. Personal servants to the king are typically experienced, highly trained, and they certainly don't stay in the royal family wing. My fingers found my grandmother's pendant again, rubbing its smooth surface as I contemplated this strange turn of events. He mentioned something about a curse, I said quietly. Do you know anything about that? The silence that followed was heavy. Then I heard Kira move closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. There are rumors. Nothing anyone would dare speak openly about. But the king has changed in recent years, become harsher, more isolated. Some say he's not the same man who took the throne 5 years ago. A chill ran down my spine. Changed how? I've already said too much, Kira replied, her voice snapping back to its professional tone. You should rest now. I'll return in the morning to help you dress. After she left, I explored my new chambers on my own, trailing my fingers along walls of what felt like smooth stone and rich tapestries. The bed was enormous, its linen softer than anything I'd ever touched. The windows, when I found them, let in a cool breeze that smelled of evergreens and mountain air. So different from the marshy forests of my home. I unpacked my meager belongings, arranging my herbs on what Kira had described as a writing desk. There wasn't much else. A spare dress, my grandmother's small book of herbal remedies, which I couldn't read but kept as a memento, and a wooden comb for my pale blonde hair. As I prepared for sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stepped into something much larger and more dangerous than a simple court joke. King Alaric's words echoed in my mind. I've been searching for someone like you for a very long time. What could he possibly want with a blind Omega? And what curse did he believe I could help him break? My sleep that night was restless, filled with dreams of wolves running through moonlit forests and silver eyes watching me from the darkness. I woke to the sound of my chamber door opening. Instantly alert, I sat up, pulling the blankets around me. Who's there? It's just me, my lady, Kira's voice answered. I've brought breakfast and your new clothes. I'm not a lady, I protested automatically. In my pack, I'd been barely above a servant myself. Kira made a non-committal sound as she moved around the room, setting things down. The king has given orders that you're to be treated with the respect accorded to his personal advisor. His words, not mine. Advisor? I repeated, bewildered. I've only just arrived. What could I possibly advise him on? That's between you and his majesty, Kira replied diplomatically. Now, would you like to eat before or after you dress? The new clothes turned out to be multiple gowns of what Kira described as the finest silk and velvet. In various shades of blue and silver, I ran my fingers over them in amazement, feeling their weight and texture. These must have cost a fortune, I murmured. They were delivered this morning with explicit instructions, Kira explained, as she helped me into one of the simpler dresses. Though simple was relative when it came to royal garments. The king has requested your presence in his private study after you've eaten. My stomach tightened with nerves. Did he say why? No, but he rarely explains himself. There was a hint of fondness in Kira's voice that surprised me, despite his reputation. The king is fair, harsh at times, but never cruel without reason. You've served him long? I asked as she arranged my hair, curious about this woman who seemed unafraid of the Alpha King. Since he took the throne, she replied. I was his sister's handmaiden before. She stopped abruptly, before she left. Another mystery, then. I didn't press, though my curiosity burned. Instead, I ate the breakfast Kira had brought, warm bread with honey, dried fruits, and herbs steeped in hot water that smelled of mint. and something citrusy. Afterwards, Kira guided me through the castle corridors. I counted steps and noted sounds, building another mental map of my new surroundings. The stone floors gave way to carpet in some areas. The air grew warmer as we passed what smelled like kitchens, cooler as we climbed stairs. Throughout our journey, conversations hushed as we passed, whispers following in our wake. "They're staring at you," Kira murmured. "Word has spread about the blind Omega who caught the king's interest." "Is that what they're calling me?" I asked, tightening my grip on my walking stick. "Among other things," Kira replied with a snort. "Court gossip travels faster than wildfire. Half the nobility believes you're a sorceress who's enchanted the king. The other half thinks you're his newest plaything." Heat flooded my cheeks. "I'm neither. What you actually are might be more dangerous than either," Kira said cryptically before stopping. "Here we are, the king's private study." She knocked on what sounded like a heavy wooden door. A muffled enter came from within, and Kira squeezed my hand reassuringly before opening the door and announcing, "Lady Alara, Your Majesty." "Stop calling her that," the king's deep voice commanded, though there was no real anger in it. "Come in, Alara. Kira, leave us." The door closed behind me, and I stood uncertainly, trying to orient myself in the unfamiliar room. It smelled of parchment, ink, and that same pine and frost scent that seemed to follow the king everywhere. 10 steps forward and you'll find a chair," King Alaric said. I followed his directions, counting carefully and finding the chair exactly where he'd said it would be. I sat, arranging my new dress around me, suddenly very aware of how different I must look from the bedraggled Omega who'd knelt before him yesterday. "The clothes suit you," he observed, his voice coming from across what I assumed was a desk. "Blue brings out the silver in your eyes." "So I'm told," I replied, a hint of dry humor in my voice, though I'll have to take your word for it. He laughed, that same genuine sound I'd heard yesterday that transformed him from fearsome Alpha King to something more approachable. "You're still not afraid to speak your mind, I see." "Should I be?" "Most people are." The humor faded from his voice. "Most people tread very carefully around me these days." I tilted my head, considering him though I couldn't see him. "Is that because of the curse you mentioned?" A sharp intake of breath, then the sound of a chair scraping back as he stood. Footsteps circled around what must have been his desk, approaching until I could feel his presence directly before me. "You remember that," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure if you would. I remember everything people say to me," I replied. "When you can't see faces, words become even more important." He knelt before me. I could tell by how his voice lowered, now coming from the same level as mine. "What else do you remember from yesterday, Alara?" "You said I was dangerous. You called my pendant the mark of the moon priestesses. You knew about Moonflower." I hesitated, then added, "And you said I belong to you now." His hand found mine, fingers brushing over my knuckles in that same gentle way that belied his fearsome reputation. "All true. But I didn't tell you why I brought you here, did I?" I shook my head. "No, you didn't." "Walk with me," he said suddenly, standing and pulling me to my feet. "There's something I need to show you." "I'm not particularly good with visual demonstrations," I reminded him dryly. He made that sound again, half laugh, half growl. "Trust me, little Omega. This you'll be able to see." He led me from his study, his hand firm around mine. We walked in silence through corridors that grew increasingly quiet and empty. The air changed, cooler, mustier, as if these passages were rarely used. "Where are we going?" I asked finally. "The old temple," he replied. "It hasn't been used in generations, not since the last of the moon priestesses disappeared." My grandmother's pendant seemed to grow heavier against my chest. "And what will we find there? Answers, I hope." His grip tightened slightly. "Watch your step here. The floor drops." I navigated the step with his guidance, and soon I felt the passage open into a much larger space. The air here was different again, cooler still, but fresher somehow, with a faint scent I couldn't quite place. Something mineral and ancient. "This was once the sacred heart of the castle," King Alaric explained, his voice echoing slightly in what must be a cavernous room. "Before my ancestors built the throne room and great hall above, this was where they communed with the moon goddess. where they sought her blessing and wisdom. He guided me forward a few more steps, then positioned me carefully. We're standing in the center of the temple. Above us is an opening in the ceiling, a perfect circle cut through the mountain rock. During the full moon, the light shines directly down onto this spot. I lifted my face, imagining it. "Why have you brought me here?" Instead of answering, he placed something in my hands, a small leather-bound book similar in size to my grandmother's herbal guide. "This was found in the library archives last year," he explained. "It's a journal belonging to the last high priestess who served in this temple over 100 years ago. My scholars have been translating it piece by piece. It speaks of a prophecy and a curse." My fingers traced the cover of the book, feeling its age and importance. "And you believe this curse is affecting you now?" "I know it is." His voice hardened. 5 years ago, after my father died and I took the throne, something changed in me. At first I thought it was just the burden of leadership, the pressure of becoming Alpha King so young. But it's more than that. He began to pace. I could hear his boots on the stone floor. "There's something inside me, Ilara. Something dark and vengeful that grows stronger each day. It whispers thoughts that aren't mine, drives me to cruelties I would never have contemplated before. I've watched myself become a monster, powerless to stop it." The raw pain in his voice struck me to my core. "What does this have to do with me?" He stopped pacing. "The journal speaks of a blind seer, a woman touched by the moon goddess who would come when the kingdom was in greatest peril, a woman who could see truth where others saw only darkness." "That's not me," I protested. "I'm just a blind Omega who grows herbs." "Your pendant says otherwise," he countered. "As does your silver eyes, your ability with Moonflower, the timing of your arrival." He moved closer again, his scent enveloping me. "Do you know what Moonflower really does, Ilara?" I hesitated, then decided truth was my only option now. My grandmother said it reveals what eyes cannot see, that when prepared properly and used during the full moon, it can show the true nature of things. "Yes." His voice was barely above a whisper now. "And the full moon is tomorrow night." Understanding dawned. "You want me to use the Moonflower to see what's happening to you?" "I want you to save me," King Alaric said bluntly, "before whatever is consuming me takes over completely, before I become something my kingdom fears rather than respects." The weight of his request settled over me like a physical thing. This powerful Alpha King, ruler of territories spanning 3 mountain ranges, was placing his fate in my hands, hands that had never held anything more valuable than herb bundles and a walking stick. "And if I can't?" I asked softly. "If I'm not this seer from the prophecy?" His fingers brushed my cheek, tucking a strand of pale hair behind my ear. The touch sent warmth cascading through me, despite the seriousness of our conversation. "Then at least I tried," he answered. "And you'll still never go back to Lord Vance and his cruelty. That much I can promise you, regardless of what happens tomorrow night." The tenderness in his voice made my throat tighten unexpectedly. Despite having known him for barely a day, I found myself wanting to help this troubled king who spoke to me as an equal rather than a burden. "I'll need my herbs," I said finally, "and specific instructions on how to prepare the Moonflower. My grandmother taught me some, but if there are temple rituals..." "All will be provided," he assured me, relief evident in his voice. The old texts describe the ceremony in detail. As we stood there in that ancient temple, the weight of centuries pressed down upon us both. He, a king fighting against his own darkness, and I, a blind Omega, supposedly chosen by the moon goddess herself. "What if you don't like what the Moonflower reveals?" I asked, giving voice to my deepest fear. "What if the truth is worse than not knowing?" King Alaric's hand found mine once more, his grip warm and steady. "Some risks are worth taking, little Omega, and some truths, no matter how painful, are better than living in darkness." Coming from anyone else, those words might have seemed insensitive to my blindness, but from him, they felt like an acknowledgement that he understood darkness in his own way, a different kind of blindness that was consuming him from within. "Tomorrow night, then," I agreed, sealing our strange pact in the forgotten temple of a goddess I barely understood. "Tomorrow night," he echoed, and in those 2 words hung the fate of us both. I spent the remainder of that day sequestered in my chambers, preparing for the ritual ahead. Kira had delivered the translated pages from the High Priestess's journal, reading them aloud to me with growing wonder in her voice. "This can't be real," she murmured, after finishing a particularly detailed passage about the moonflower ceremony. "These rituals haven't been performed in generations, and yet here we are," I replied, carefully sorting my herbs on the table before me. The moonflower I'd brought was precious, but insufficient. Fortunately, the king had sent servants to collect more from the mountain meadows where it grew wild. "The king must truly be desperate," Kira said, her voice lowered despite us being alone. "He's never allowed anyone to see him vulnerable before." I paused in my work. What exactly do people say about him? About how he's changed? Kira was silent for so long I thought she might not answer. Finally, she sighed. "When King Alaric first took the throne after his father's death, he was beloved. Charismatic, fair, strong, but merciful, the perfect alpha ruler. But over the past 5 years, he's grown colder, harsher in his judgments. He isolates himself for days, sometimes weeks. When he emerges, his decisions are increasingly erratic. And no one knows why?" I asked, resuming my careful separation of herb stems. "There are theories," Kira said cautiously. "Some say grief over his father's death drove him to madness. Others believe he's possessed by a vengeful spirit. The most persistent rumor involves his former betrothed, a princess from the southern Pax." My hand stilled. "What happened to her?" "She disappeared the night before their wedding 5 years ago. Some say she fled, unwilling to marry him. Others say—" her voice dropped even lower. "Others say the darkness in him began that night. That perhaps he killed her in a rage when she tried to leave." A chill ran through me. "Do you believe that?" "No," Kira answered without hesitation. "I've served in this castle since I was a child. I know the king has changed, but I cannot believe he would harm an innocent. There's something else at work here, something unnatural." Her certainty was reassuring, yet the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on me even more heavily. If the king hadn't changed through grief or rage, but through some external force, some curse as he claimed, then what might happen during the ritual tonight? "You should rest before moonrise," Kira suggested, touching my shoulder gently. "I'll wake you when it's time." I nodded, suddenly exhausted from the tension and preparation. As I lay down, still dressed in my blue gown, I clutched my grandmother's pendant and tried to quiet my racing thoughts. What if I failed? What if I wasn't the seer from the prophecy? What if the moonflower revealed something so terrible that the king's fate, and possibly mine, would be sealed beyond redemption? Sleep claimed me despite my anxieties, and with it came dreams, vivid, powerful images that should have been impossible for someone who had never seen anything at all. A silver wolf running through moonlit forests, a crown made of thorns and ice, a beautiful woman with cruel eyes, laughing as she held a beating heart in her hands, blood on stone, a broken promise, a sacrifice, and through it all, a voice, my grandmother's voice whispering, "Your eyes may not see, but your heart will recognize truth when others are blind to it." I woke with a gasp, heart pounding, as Kira gently shook my shoulder. "It's time," she said. "The moon is rising." The temple felt different at night. As Kira led me through the silent corridors and down the ancient stairs, I could sense a change in the air, an electric tension, as if the very stones around us were holding their breath in anticipation. "The king is already there," Kira whispered as we approached the temple entrance, along with his most trusted advisor, Lord Nathaniel. "No one else?" I asked, clutching my herb pouch tightly. "No one else knows about this," she replied. "If word spread that the king was participating in old magic rituals..." She didn't need to finish. Even in my remote pack, I knew that while alphas were respected and feared for their strength and power, any hint of weakness could be exploited by rivals. A king seeking magical intervention for an unknown affliction would be seen as vulnerable, a perfect target for those hungry for power. As we entered the temple, I immediately sensed the moonlight. Though I couldn't see it, I could feel its energy streaming down from the opening in the ceiling, creating a pool of power in the center of the room. The air there vibrated with an ancient magic that made my skin tingle and my pendant warm against my chest. Ilara. The king's voice reached me from across the chamber. He sounded tense, controlled, but with an undercurrent of something like hope. Your Majesty, I replied, dipping my head in respect. I've brought everything needed for the ritual. As have we, said another voice, older, gravelly, presumably Lord Nathaniel. The altar is prepared according to the old texts. All that remains is the moonflower preparation. Kira guided me to what felt like a stone table at the edge of the room. I unpacked my herbs with practiced precision, feeling for each bundle by texture and scent. The ritual calls for the moonflower to be crushed with silver and mixed with pure water collected under the full moon, I explained, working as I spoke. My grandmother taught me that the person seeking truth must drink this mixture while standing in direct moonlight. And what happens then? Lord Nathaniel asked, skepticism evident in his tone. I hesitated. I'm not entirely sure. The ritual is meant to reveal truth, to show what is hidden. But how exactly that revelation manifests may depend on the nature of what's being concealed. And your role in this? The king asked, moving closer. I could feel his heat at my side, smell his now familiar scent, stronger tonight with an undertone of anxiety. According to the texts, the seer guides the seeker through the vision, I replied, continuing my careful preparation of the herbs. My grandmother once told me that moonflower opens a doorway between worlds, between what is and what truly is. The seer stands at that threshold, ensuring the seeker doesn't become lost. Lord Nathaniel made a skeptical noise. This sounds dangerously close to forbidden magic, Your Majesty. If the council were to learn of this, the council answers to me, not the other way around, King Alaric snapped. Then, with visible effort, he moderated his tone. Your concerns are noted, old friend. But we've tried everything else. 5 years of searching for answers through conventional means has yielded nothing. And what if this yields something worse than nothing? Nathaniel pressed. What if the ritual reveals that this condition cannot be cured? Then at least I'll know, the king replied grimly, living with this darkness growing inside me, not knowing its source or purpose. That is a torture I can no longer endure. His words resonated with me deeply. Though our circumstances were vastly different, I understood what it meant to live with uncertainty, with a fundamental part of oneself that couldn't be changed or cured. The preparation is ready, I announced, holding up a small silver cup filled with the moonflower mixture. It emanated a subtle glow, perceptible even to me as a warmth against my fingers. What now? The king asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Now you must stand in the center of the temple, where the moonlight is strongest, I instructed, rising from my position at the table. Drink the mixture, and I will guide you through what follows. I felt Kira squeeze my arm encouragingly before stepping back. Lord Nathaniel remained silent, his disapproval palpable even without words, but the king moved decisively, his footsteps echoing as he walked to the center of the ancient temple. I followed, counting steps carefully until I stood just at the edge of what I sensed was the pool of moonlight. The king would stand within it. I would remain on the threshold, as the texts described. Are you ready? I asked softly, holding out the silver cup. No, he answered honestly. But I will do it anyway. His fingers brushed mine as he took the cup. I heard him inhale deeply, then the soft sound of him drinking. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, it burns, he gasped. The cup clattered to the stone floor. Like ice and fire together, I reached out instinctively, finding his arm. His skin was indeed burning hot beneath my touch, yet he shivered as if freezing. Stay with me, I urged. Focus on my voice. Tell me what you see. Darkness at first, he said, his voice strained. Then, light. Moonlight. But different. Sharper, brighter than I've ever seen it. I kept my hand on his arm, feeling tremors run through his powerful frame. Keep looking. The truth will reveal itself. His breathing grew ragged. I see her. Elena, my betrothed who vanished. My heart constricted. So Kira's story had been true. What is she doing? I prompted gently. Standing before an altar. Not this one. Somewhere else, a dark place. His words came faster now, tumbling over each other as the vision took hold. She's smiling, cutting her palm. Blood dripping into a bowl, saying words I cannot hear. Another figure approaches, a woman. But not entirely. Human. I tightened my grip on his arm as he swayed. Stay with me, Alaric, I murmured, using his name without the title for the first time. What happens next? The inhuman woman gives her something. A vial. Elena drinks it and her eyes change, become like yours. Silver, but cold. So cold, a violent shudder ran through him. She's coming back to the castle, to our wedding night. She's still Elena, but not. Something else wears her skin. The pieces began falling into place in my mind. The timing of his change, the rumors of his betrothed's disappearance, the growing darkness within him. She comes to my chambers, he continued, voice rough with emotion. I'm so happy to see her, relieved she hasn't abandoned me. But when I embrace her, she reaches into my chest, not physically, but her essence, her spirit somehow pushes into me. It burns like dying. She whispers, a gift from the Shadow Queen. Your heart is no longer yours, Alpha King. A binding curse, I whispered, remembering passages from the High Priestess's journal. She tethered your heart to something dark. Yes, he choked out. Each year it grows stronger. Each year more of me slips away. I can feel it even now, clawing at me from inside, raging against this ritual, against you. His arm tensed beneath my grip, muscles hardening to stone. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, deeper, colder, with a cruel edge that raised the hair on my neck. Such a pretty little Omega, this new voice said through the king's lips. Do you think your pathetic herbs and ancient rituals can break what the Shadow Queen has wrought? He belongs to us now. His power, his kingdom, his bloodline, all will serve our return. My pendant burned against my skin, seemingly in response to this dark presence. Instinctively, I grabbed it with my free hand, holding it toward the king. Who are you? I demanded, surprising myself with my boldness, a laugh. Nothing like the king's warm chuckle, but a harsh, brittle sound. I am ancient. I am patient. I am vengeance for what was stolen from us centuries ago, when your moon priestesses banished our kind to the shadow realms. Understanding dawned. The text had spoken of an ancient war between the moon goddess and the Shadow Queen, a conflict that had ended with the Shadow Court's banishment, but apparently, that banishment hadn't been permanent. Release him, I commanded, stepping fully into the moonlight now, guided by instinct and something deeper, something that seemed to flow from my pendant, through my body, into my voice. He is not yours to possess, and who are you to demand anything of me, blind little Omega? The thing inside Alaric mocked. You are nothing, less than nothing, a joke sent to amuse a dying king. The words stung, echoing the cruelty I'd faced all my life. But something had changed in me since arriving at this castle. Perhaps it was the king's unexpected respect, or the discovery of my grandmother's true legacy, or simply the certainty that I stood exactly where I was meant to be. I am Alara of the Eastern Forest, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. Granddaughter of Seraphina, last of the moon priestesses. I may not see with my eyes, but I see you clearly now, shadow creature, and I am not afraid. I placed both hands on the king's chest, directly over his heart, where the entity had taken root. My pendant blazed between us, its heat searing but somehow not painful. The moonlight intensified around us, becoming so bright that even I, in my eternal darkness, perceived it as a silver glow at the edges of my consciousness. By the light of the moon goddess, I intoned, words coming to me from somewhere beyond memory. I command you to reveal your bond. Show me the tether that binds this man's heart to your mistress's will. A scream tore from Alaric's throat, a sound of such agony that tears sprang to my eyes. But beneath my hands, I felt something shifting, struggling, trying to escape the light that poured through me. I see it, Alaric gasped, his true voice breaking through momentarily. A black cord from my heart, stretching away into darkness. Alara, I can see it because of you. Then cut it, I urged. The moonflower shows truth, but only you can sever the bond. Another scream, this one not entirely human, as the king fought his internal battle. I held firm, keeping my hands over his heart, channeling whatever power flowed through my grandmother's pendant. It's fighting me, he groaned. It knows what we're trying to do. You are stronger, I insisted. You are Alpha King. Your will is your own. For one terrible moment, I feared we would fail. The presence inside him surged, dark and cold beneath my palms. Then Alaric's hands came up to cover mine, his touch burning hot against my skin. Together, he whispered. And something snapped, an almost audible crack like ice breaking on a frozen lake. A rush of fetid air blasted past me, carrying with it a shriek of rage and frustration that faded into the distance. The king collapsed to his knees, pulling me down with him as we both gasped for breath in the suddenly quiet temple. Is it gone? I asked, still holding on to him, afraid to let go. Not entirely, he answered truthfully, his voice hoarse but his own again. But the bond is broken. I can feel the difference, like a weight lifted from my soul. Lord Nathaniel rushed forward, having witnessed everything from the edge of the temple. Your Majesty, are you injured? No, old friend, the king replied, his arms still around me. For the first time in 5 years, I believe I might actually heal. The days following the ritual passed in a haze of exhaustion and tentative hope. The king had been carried to his chambers, barely conscious after the ordeal, while I had collapsed soon after, the mysterious power that had flowed through me exacting its price in bone-deep fatigue. I slept for nearly 2 days, according to Kira. When I finally woke, she informed me that the king had been in and out of consciousness as well, fighting a fever that seemed to burn away the last remnants of the shadow creature's influence. Lord Nathaniel has taken charge of court matters, she explained, as she helped me sip cool water. Only he and I know what truly happened in the temple. The official story is that the king is suffering from a seasonal illness. And the unofficial story? I asked, my voice still rough from sleep, Kira's hand stilled on my shoulder. Whispers are spreading, Alara. Servants notice the herbs, the full moon ritual preparations. Some are saying you've bewitched the king, that you've ensnared him with Omega magic. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Omega magic? Is that even a thing? To those who fear what they don't understand, anything can be magic. Her voice was grim. Be careful. Not everyone is pleased with your sudden elevation from joke to whatever you are now. Whatever I was now. The question lingered in my mind as strength gradually returned to my body. Was I still just a blind Omega who grew herbs? Or was I truly what the king believed? A descendant of the moon priestesses, somehow chosen to help break an ancient curse? My grandmother's pendant seemed heavier around my neck, charged with new significance. I found myself touching it often, remembering the power that had surged through it during the ritual, power I hadn't known I possessed. Or perhaps hadn't believed I deserved to claim. On the 3rd day after the ritual, as I sat by the window in my chamber, breathing in the mountain air and sorting through my depleted herb supplies, a knock came at my door. Enter, I called, expecting Kira with the midday meal, but the footsteps that approached were heavier, more deliberate. My heart quickened as I recognized the king's distinctive gait. Your Majesty, I said, starting to rise. Please don't stand, he said quickly. And when we're alone, I'd prefer if you called me Alaric. I settled back in my chair, my fingers nervously stroking the leaves of the time bundle I'd been working with. How are you feeling, Alaric? He moved closer, taking the seat opposite mine. Better than I have in years, clearer, like waking from a nightmare that's lingered too long. The shadow creature, it's truly gone? I asked. Not entirely, he admitted. I can still feel it sometimes, especially in moments of anger or frustration, but it's fainter now, more like an echo than a voice. The bond that gave it control is broken, thanks to you. His hand covered mine, stilling my restless fingers among the herbs. The touch sent warmth spiraling up my arm, a now familiar reaction to his proximity that I couldn't quite understand, or didn't dare to examine too closely. "I owe you a debt I can never repay," he continued. "You risked everything to help a king you barely knew, based on nothing but a prophecy and a desperate request." I turned my hand beneath his, our palms meeting. "I did what anyone would do." "No," he said firmly. "What you did was extraordinary, and it confirmed what I suspected from the moment you stood before me in the Great Hall. You are far more than Lord Vance and your former pack ever understood." His certainty made me uncomfortable, pressing against a lifetime of being told I was worthless. "I still don't fully understand what happened in the temple," I confessed. "The words I spoke, the power I felt, it wasn't me. Not entirely. Perhaps it was your heritage awakening," Alaric suggested. "The blood of the moon priestesses running true at last. Or perhaps it was just the moonflower and an old pendant," I countered, unable to fully accept his grand vision of me. "Either way, I'm glad it helped." He squeezed my hand gently before releasing it. "Ever practical, even in the face of magic. It's refreshing." The smile in his voice was evident. "But there are practical matters we must discuss as well. Your position here, for one." My stomach tightened. Despite his promise that I would never return to Lord Vance, I couldn't help but wonder if my usefulness had ended with the ritual. "I'd like you to stay," he said, seeming to read my anxiety. "Not as a servant or temporary guest, but as a permanent member of my council." I blinked in surprise. "Your council? But I know nothing of politics or warfare or—" "You know about healing," he interrupted. "About herbs and their properties. About seeing truth where others see only what they wish to see. Those skills are far more valuable to me than another war strategist or tax collector." The offer was beyond anything I could have imagined when I'd knelt trembling before him in the Great Hall. Yet doubt gnawed at me. What will your nobles say? The Alpha King elevating a blind Omega to his council? They'll say what they always say, behind my back, in whispers they think I can't hear. His voice hardened slightly. "But they will obey, because I am still their king, and perhaps in time, they'll come to respect you as I do." Respect. Such a simple word, yet one I'd rarely heard applied to myself. The thought of earning it from others, of being valued for my knowledge rather than pitied for my blindness, was intoxicating. "I'd be honored," I said finally, "though I fear I may disappoint you." "I doubt that very much." His voice had softened again, carrying an undertone I couldn't quite identify. "There is one other matter, however. A more delicate question." The shift in his tone made my pulse quicken. "Yes?" "The shadow creature. During the ritual, it mentioned a bloodline, my bloodline." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "For 5 years, I've avoided taking a mate, partly because of the darkness I felt growing within me. I feared passing it to any children I might father." I nodded, unsure where this was leading, but suddenly very aware of how alone we were in my chamber. "Now that the bond is broken, the council will renew their pressure for me to secure the succession." Another pause. "They've already begun suggesting suitable candidates from noble Omega bloodlines." An unexpected pang shot through me at his words. Of course he would need to choose a mate. An Alpha King required heirs, and those heirs would need to be strong, politically advantageous. Not blind, not common-born, not me. The realization that I cared, that somewhere in these strange, intense days a seed of feeling had taken root, struck me with stunning force. "I wish you happiness," I managed, proud of how steady my voice remained. "Whoever you choose will be fortunate." Alaric made a sound, half laugh, half growl. "You still don't see it, do you?" "See what?" I asked, genuinely confused. He moved suddenly, kneeling before me as he had in the temple. His hands found mine, engulfing them in his larger ones. "From the moment you stood before me in the Great Hall, something in me recognized something in you," he said, his voice low and intense. "Not the shadow creature. It feared you from the start, but the true me, the part that was still fighting for control. Even before we confirmed your connection to the moon priestesses, I felt drawn to you in a way I cannot explain." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What are you saying?" I'm saying that I don't want a politically expedient match with a stranger, he replied. I'm saying that the woman who saved me, who saw truth when everyone else saw only darkness, she is the one I want by my side. I pulled my hands free, overwhelmed. You can't possibly mean that. You barely know me. I know that you're brave enough to speak honestly to an alpha king when everyone else cowers, he countered. I know that you're skilled and intelligent enough to master herbs that others can't even identify with full sight. I know that you're compassionate enough to help a stranger when you had every reason to wish him ill. His hand found my cheek, thumb brushing lightly over my skin. And I know that when you touch me, something inside me quiets. The restlessness, the anger that's been my companion for so long. For the first time in years, I feel peace. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, yet the divide between us seemed impossibly vast. I'm blind, I said flatly. Common born. I was sent to you as a joke, and yet, you may be the only one who truly sees me. He replied softly. I'm not asking for an answer now. I know this is sudden, perhaps even unwelcome. But I want you to know that when I do choose a mate, it will not be based on politics or power or tradition. He rose to his feet, his hand falling away from my face. The loss of contact left me oddly bereft. Think on it, he said, and know that regardless of your answer, your place here is secure. You have earned that much and more. After he left, I sat motionless by the window, my herbs forgotten in my lap. His words echoed in my mind, colliding with a lifetime of believing myself unworthy of even basic kindness, let alone the devotion of an alpha king. Could he truly want me, not out of gratitude or pity, but genuine desire? The thought seemed as fantastical as the ancient prophecies and shadow creatures that had brought us together. Yet the memory of his touch lingered on my skin, and somewhere deep within me, a voice that sounded suspiciously like my grandmother's whispered, "Your heart will recognize truth when others are blind to it." That evening, as I prepared for dinner, a formal affair in the great hall, where the king would make his first public appearance since the ritual, Kira helped me dress in a gown of silver that she assured me complemented my pale hair and unusual eyes. "The king has announced that you'll be presented to the court tonight," she said, as she arranged my hair in an elaborate style. "As the newest member of his council, and how has that news been received?" I asked, already anticipating the answer. "About as well as you'd expect," Kira replied dryly. "Lord Harrington nearly apoplectic, Lady Serena in tears, and Lord Nathaniel quietly smug. Lord Nathaniel approves." That surprised me. "He was there in the temple," she reminded me. "He saw what you did, and Nathaniel has always valued results over protocol." She adjusted my grandmother's pendant so it lay prominently against the silver fabric. "Besides, it's not every day one meets a descendant of the moon priestesses." "If that's truly what I am," I murmured. "After what happened in the temple, I'd say there's little doubt." Her hands stilled on my shoulders. "Be prepared, though. Not everyone will welcome your elevation. Some may even seek to undermine you, to prove you're nothing but a fraud who somehow tricked the king. Let them try," I said with more confidence than I felt. Truth has a way of revealing itself sooner or later. As Kira led me toward the great hall, where I would face the court not as a joke but as a respected advisor, perhaps even as a potential mate to the king, I touched my pendant one last time and straightened my shoulders. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same courage that had carried me through the temple ritual. For I was no longer merely Alara the Blind Omega, I was Alara of the Eastern Forest, descendant of moon priestesses, seeker of truth, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. The great hall hummed with tension as I entered on Kira's arm. Conversations hushed momentarily before erupting into furious whispers. Though I couldn't see the stares, I felt them like physical pressure against my skin. Curious, hostile, evaluating. "The king is at the head table," Kira murmured. "He's watching you. He looks proud." The thought warmed me as we navigated through the crowd. People parted before us, some stepping back as if my blindness might be contagious. Others leaned closer, their sense betraying their alpha or beta status, dominance and curiosity mingling in equal measure. Lady Alara, a silky female voice, intercepted us. "How unexpected to see you given such prominence this evening." "Lady Serena," Kira acknowledged stiffly. The king has honored Alara with a council position. A delicate laugh, sharp as broken glass. Yes, we've all heard the fascinating news. Tell me, what exactly is your expertise, Alara, besides herbs and blindness? The insult was thinly veiled, designed to remind everyone within earshot of my supposed inadequacies. A week ago, I might have shrunk from such cruelty. Now, strengthened by recent events and the king's faith in me, I smiled. Truth, Lady Serena, I replied evenly. I specialize in seeing what remains hidden to others. A surprisingly rare skill at court, I'm told. A sharp intake of breath told me my barb had landed. Before she could respond, another voice joined us, male, elderly, amused. Well said, my dear, Lord Nathaniel chuckled. Lady Serena, I believe your father is looking for you. Something about a northern alliance needing discussion? The rustle of skirts indicated Lady Serena's departure, though her anger lingered in the air like perfume. Don't mind her, Nathaniel said, taking my arm from Kira. Her nose has been out of joint since the king declined her father's proposal 3 years ago. She'd hoped to be queen, and now she thinks I'm a threat to that ambition, I concluded as he guided me forward. Are you not? He asked shrewdly. Heat flooded my cheeks. The king was merely being kind. Alaric has many qualities, Nathaniel interrupted. Excessive kindness has rarely been one of them, even before the shadow influence. If he's shown you favor, it's because he sees value in you. He patted my hand. As do I, for what it's worth. What you did in the temple, I've served 3 Alpha Kings in my lifetime, and never witnessed anything like it. We reached the dais where the high table stood. Nathaniel guided my hand to the back of a chair. The king has seated you at his right hand, he murmured. A deliberate message to the court. Before I could respond, a hush fell over the hall. The king had stood. Friends, advisors, honored guests, Alaric's voice carried effortlessly through the vast space. I thank you for your patience during my recent indisposition. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. As some of you may have heard, I've made an addition to my council. Lady Alara of the Eastern Forest brings unique knowledge of herbal medicine and healing arts that will benefit our kingdom greatly. His hand found mine beneath the table, a brief, reassuring squeeze. The gesture was hidden from the court, but its impact on me was profound. A private connection amid the public ceremony. I expect her to be accorded the same respect given to any council member, he continued, a subtle edge entering his voice. Those who find this difficult may address their concerns to me personally. The threat was velvet-covered steel. No one would dare challenge him openly, not when his power as Alpha King remained absolute despite the rumors of illness and instability. The feast that followed was elaborate, though I appreciated it more through smell and taste than the visual presentation others enjoyed. Alaric quietly described each dish as it arrived, his voice low enough for only me to hear. The consideration touched me deeply, another small kindness that revealed his character more clearly than grand gestures ever could. Between courses, nobles approached to introduce themselves, their curiosity barely disguised as courtesy. I answered their questions with careful composure, neither hiding my blindness nor allowing it to define me. Some departed skeptical, others intrigued, but all understood that regardless of their personal opinions, I now stood under the king's protection. You handle them well, Alaric observed, after a particularly persistent duke finally retreated. Like you've navigated court politics all your life. I smiled, turning slightly toward his voice. When you grow up blind in a world that values strength and sight above all else, you learn to navigate hostile territory very quickly. This court is no different from my old pack, just better dressed and more articulate in their disdain. He laughed, the sound warming me like sunshine. You're right, of course, though not everyone here is an enemy. No, I agreed. Lord Nathaniel, for one, seems genuinely supportive. Nathaniel recognizes power when he sees it, regardless of its form. Alaric's voice lowered further. And he witnessed what happened in the temple, how you commanded the shadow creature when I could not. The memory sent a shiver through me. That wasn't me, not entirely. It was something working through me. The moon goddess, according to Nathaniel's research, Alaric said. The journals speak of her choosing vessels among her priestesses, women through whom she could directly influence our world. The idea was overwhelming. I'm no priestess. Perhaps not by training, he conceded, but by blood? By gift? The silver eyes, the affinity for moonflower, your immunity to the shadow's influence. These are not coincidences, Alara. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted at the hall's entrance. Guards' voices raised in protest. Then a familiar scent reached me, marshy forests, wood smoke, and the distinctive musk of the eastern forest pack. My body tensed involuntarily. Lord Vance, I whispered. Alaric's hand covered mine again, this time protectively. What is he doing here? My king. Lord Vance's voice boomed across the now silent hall. Forgive my unannounced arrival, but I come on urgent business regarding one of our pack members. Approach, Alaric commanded, his tone glacial. Heavy footsteps crossed the hall, accompanied by at least 2 others. Guards or pack members, I couldn't tell. Lord Vance had always traveled with an entourage, enhancing his sense of importance. Your Majesty, Vance said, stopping before the high table. I could smell the false deference in his voice. I've come to rectify a misunderstanding about the Omega we sent to your household. What misunderstanding might that be? Alaric asked, danger lurking beneath his polite inquiry. Vance cleared his throat. It appears there was confusion about her status. The blind Omega, Ilara, was not intended as a permanent gift to your household. She's promised as mate to my son, and we've come to retrieve her. Shock rendered me momentarily speechless. This was an outright lie. Vance's son Damon had never shown any interest in me beyond occasional cruel taunting. I had never been promised to anyone. I'd been considered too flawed to mate. Is that so? Alaric's voice had dropped to a register that raised goosebumps on my arms. The Alpha King's power gathering like a storm. How strange that this arrangement was never mentioned when she was presented to my court. A regrettable oversight, Vance replied smoothly. In our eagerness to please your Majesty with skilled Omegas, this detail was forgotten. But now my son has returned from his travels and claims his intended mate. I found my voice at last. That's a lie, I stated clearly, turning toward Vance's scent. I was never promised to Damon. I was sent here because you considered me worthless. A Joe gift you thought would amuse the king while ridding you of a burden. Murmurs rippled through the court. Vance's scent spiked with anger. The Omega is confused. Her condition makes her memory unreliable. My sight is impaired, Lord Vance, not my mind, I replied evenly. You told Mira yourself that sending me here was finally putting the blind burden to good use. Those were your exact words the night before we left. Alaric rose from his seat, and I felt the energy in the hall shift as everyone responded to the Alpha King's movement. It seems we have conflicting accounts, he said, his voice deceptively calm. But fortunately, this matter is easily resolved. A pause, heavy with meaning. Ilara is now a member of my council. More importantly, she is under my personal protection. She will not be returning to your pack under any circumstances. The silence that followed was absolute. No Alpha challenged the Alpha King directly, not if they valued their life and status. With all due respect, Your Majesty, Vance finally said, his tone walking a dangerous line between deference and challenge. An Omega promised in mating belongs with her intended. These are our oldest laws. Indeed, Alaric agreed. But an Omega claimed by an Alpha King supersedes all prior arrangements. These, too, are our oldest laws. Or do you wish to contest my claim? The implication hung in the air like a drawn sword. Alaric hadn't just denied Vance's request. He'd publicly declared his intention toward me. My heart thundered in my chest as the significance of his words registered not just with me, but with every person in the Great Hall. Vance's scent flooded with fear beneath his anger. No, Alpha King, I would never contest your claim. His voice hardened. Though many might question the wisdom of choosing a blind Omega as your mate, particularly one without noble blood or political advantage. Careful, Vance, Alaric warned, and I heard in his voice the echo of the beast beneath his human form. You approach treason. Chairs scraped as others at the high table rose. Nathaniel among them, I presumed. The tension in the hall had become suffocating, two alpha powers clashing while hundreds watched in breathless anticipation. I stood as well, my hand finding Alaric's arm. The contact seemed to steady him, the barely controlled rage in his scent ebbing slightly at my touch. "Lord Vance," I said, addressing my former pack leader directly, "you sent me here believing I was worthless. You were wrong. The king has found value in my skills and knowledge, something you never bothered to look for. Whatever claim you think you have on me is void, not just by the king's word, but by your own actions when you presented me as a gift to his household." A rustle of appreciation moved through the court. Even those who might question my place had to acknowledge the logic of my argument. "The blind Omega speaks well for someone so disadvantaged," Vance sneered, dropping all pretense of respect. "One wonders what other talents she possesses to so thoroughly enchant an Alpha King." The insult was clear. He was suggesting I had used Omega wiles or even dark magic to manipulate Alaric. Before the king could respond, likely with violence given the rage now pouring off him in waves, I laughed. The sound cut through the tension, surprising everyone, including Vance. "Is that truly the best you can do, Lord Vance? Imply that I've somehow bewitched the king?" I shook my head, smiling with genuine amusement. "If I possessed such powerful magic, don't you think I would have used it years ago to escape your cruelty, or perhaps to restore my sight?" I turned slightly, addressing the wider court. "The truth is much simpler, though perhaps harder for some to accept. I offered knowledge when it was needed. I spoke truth when others offered flattery. And I faced darkness without flinching when it threatened this kingdom." I felt Alaric's arm shift beneath my hand as he stepped forward. "Lord Vance, you came to my hall uninvited, interrupted my feast with false claims, and insulted a woman under my protection." His voice was deadly quiet. "By rights, I should have you removed from my kingdom permanently." Vance's heartbeat quickened. I could hear it even from where I stood. "However," Alaric continued, "in recognition of our long alliance, I will be merciful. You will return to your territory immediately. The tribute your pack owes the crown will be doubled for the next 5 years. Compensation for the insult offered this evening." A pause. "And you will relinquish all claim to any Omega currently in your pack's territory. They may choose to stay or seek protection elsewhere, as they wish." Gasps echoed through the hall. This last punishment struck at the heart of Vance's power and pride, his control over the Omegas in his domain. "Your Majesty," Vance began, but Alaric cut him off. "Those are my terms. Accept them and leave, or reject them and face the consequences." The alpha power behind his words made the very air vibrate. No one, not even another alpha, could stand against such force. "I accept your terms, Alpha King," Vance finally conceded, hatred and humiliation evident in every syllable. "Good. Guards, escort Lord Vance and his entourage to the border. Ensure they begin their journey home immediately, regardless of the hour." The scrape of boots, the rustle of movement, and then the retreating footsteps told me Vance was being led away. Only when the great doors closed behind them did the tension in the hall begin to dissipate, conversation gradually resuming as nobles processed what they had witnessed. Alaric turned to me, his hand covering mine where it still rested on his arm. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I replied, and was surprised to find it was true. For the first time in my life, I think I truly am. His fingers tightened briefly on mine. "What I said about my claim." "I know," I interrupted gently. "It was the most expedient way to resolve the situation." "No," he said firmly. "It was truth, not expedience, but this isn't how I intended to announce it." I heard the rueful smile in his voice. I had planned something more private, more romantic. Despite everything, I found myself smiling back. Apparently fate had other ideas. "It often does," he agreed. Then, to my surprise, he raised my hand to his lips, placing a kiss on my knuckles that sent warmth cascading through me. The gesture was unmistakable to everyone watching, a public declaration of intent. The Alpha King had chosen his mate. The blind Omega sent as a joke would become queen. And somewhere, I was certain, my grandmother was smiling.